In this video, I'm going to be guiding you through Chapter 18 and 19, Business Competition. The advantages for competition, specifically to consumers, is that they experience lower prices, as firms cannot overcharge without losing their business to other competitors. This, in turn, means that consumers will be able to enjoy better quality goods and at a lower price, because firms must constantly offer better value for money to survive. And the disadvantages for customers is that they face market uncertainty, as firms will be forced to leave or close down if unprofitable. And due to the lack of profits, firms will suffer from a lack of innovation because competition leaves firms with less profit to invest in product development. So the products end up all looking very same, but different. The advantages of the economy with competition is that resources are allocated much more effectively and efficiently, as firms are under constant pressure to operate, wasting as little resources as possible. Higher living standards in the economy will be experienced as firms will innovate with new products, techniques, and technologies to gain a competitive edge against each other. However, the disadvantage for the economy is that resources will be heavily wasted if factors of production are immobile and cannot be easily reallocated. And it takes a long time for these resources to be released, such as redundant workers, machinery, empty buildings, and all of these will need to be reallocated somewhere. The advantages for firms is that it forces businesses to come up with fresh ideas for the future to gain market share, as they operate efficiently as possible, as this will force these firms to operate as efficiently as possible, pushing them to find ways to keep costs down to survive. However, the disadvantages for firms are that profits are relatively limited due to fierce competition, which forces the price to be lower. And with only a set number of people in the market, the business and the business rivals will need to share the total market of the industry with many other competing firms. Now moving on to the advantages and disadvantages of small firms. Small firms have greater flexibility and they can adapt to changes more quickly because owners are actively more involved in daily decisions. It is less bureaucratic and they are able to rearrange their factors of production easily. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine turning your car around. All it takes is a quick look in the mirror, and the process is pretty straightforward. Now imagine a very large truck was to do the same thing. The process will take significantly longer, and more assistance is most likely needed depending on how large and complicated the truck is. Small firms also offer highly individual, personalized service because owners are much more accessible to their customers. So they are able to offer them feedback which the owner can implement instantaneously. The disadvantages, however, is that higher average costs will be experienced because their limited output prevents them exploiting economies of scale. Also, they will find it very difficult to raise finance as they are a small firm and banks will see them as risky business. And in the case for large firms, the advantages is that they can exploit economies of scale by buying in bulk, resulting in significantly lower average costs. They will usually dominate the market with high public profile to charge higher prices and make higher profits for themselves. They are also able to innovate into the market, creating unique products which are very high quality. The disadvantages, however, is that they tend to be very bureaucratic, which leads to very slow decision making and wasted resources on administration. And in the case for large firms, workers can also suffer from poor motivation because their individual efforts may seem insignificant, which may lead to not getting a promotion that they have always dreamed of. Moving on to the factors influencing the growth of firms. Firstly, government regulation. As government encourages the innovation and prevents consumer exploitation, what they do is that they regulate and facilitate proposed mergers and takeovers, blocking the mergers that would threaten to reduce market competition. An example of this is Nvidia and ARM in 2022. Nvidia called off a $40 billion acquisition of ARM due to government regulation from the US, UK, EU, and China. The next factor that influences growth is being able to access finance, as finance is needed to make acquisitions and build new factories, to open new stores, or to develop new products. At the end of the day, if the business has no money, they won't be able to grow. The next one is economies of scale, as business growth reduces its average cost of production. If a firm is able to exploit economies of scale, they will grow. Industries like car manufacturing and air transport, costs can be lowered by producing very large quantities of output. The next factor is the desire to spread risk, as diversifying involves selling into new markets and developing entirely new products. For example, Google has many products, such as Google Cloud and workspace services such as Docs, Sheets, Drive, and Gmail. They also have the Android operating system, the Pixel lineup, which is the hardware division of the firm. They have YouTube, the Google Play Store, Waymo, Google TV, and many, many more. So if one venture or market fails, the successful performance of other areas can keep the overall firm going. One example of a failure was Google Glass. And the next factor is the desire to take over competitors. Taking over another firm is the quickest way to grow. The benefits to this is that they can rapidly increase its size while simultaneously reducing direct competition in the market. Some successful examples are Disney and Pixar, Google and Android, Instagram and Facebook, WhatsApp and Facebook, Amazon and Whole Foods, Microsoft and Minecraft, and many, many more. Moving on to the reason why firms want to stay small. Firstly, it's the size of market. As the physical market does not consist of that many people, it is very difficult to be a very large business. For example, the market for luxury yachts is limited because only a relatively small number of very wealthy people are willing and able to buy these. Let me give you another example that you could probably relate more to. Mr. Beast has 495 million subscribers, and his target audience is just anyone who wants to be entertained. So the size of his market is arguably the world's population, which is 8.3 billion people. And compared to myself, I have about 16,000. But unfortunately for me, I do not have the whole world as my potential target market, as there are an estimate of about 160,000 students that take IGCSE every year in year 11. If we multiply this by 2, factoring in year 10, my total addressable market is only 320,000 students. So the size of the market that I am operating in is significantly smaller compared to Mr. Beast's. So I will naturally struggle to grow into a very large content creator on YouTube. The next reason is the nature of the market and its niches. Factors such as low startup costs, such as hairdressing or an Uber driver, suffer from very high levels of competition. So naturally, it is very difficult for them to be very large. Or some firms would want to cater for customers with a very particular set of needs. But this, however, creates a gap in the market for a business that is prepared to tailor its goods and services for their niches. Another reason why firms stay small is a lack of finance, as growth needs heavy investments in new resources. The reality is that if firms desire to expand, they need money. And unfortunately for small businesses, they are still seen to be too risky, which makes it very difficult for them to convince banks to lend them money. And finally, it really depends on the aims and objectives of the entrepreneur, as some owners are perfectly happy running a small business, as they do not want the stress or the burden of running a very large company. They could already be making enough profit to satisfy their own needs, and the entrepreneur may prefer to spend their time with their family and friends instead of working all the time. I hope that helped. I hope you guys have a good day. Bye-bye.